welcome everybody here to another fantastic Meetup live event. Really excited about this one. It's a special one for me because I actually used to work at Starbucks for many years. This was my first job in high school, and I worked at Starbucks through college. And so this is just like a really cool full circle experience to have Lennon joining and to really talk about coffee. Fun fact, Starbucks is one of the most popular venues for Meetup events around the world. And in 2019, before the beginning of the pandemic, there were 24,000 Meetup events in Starbucks stores globally. And we still have like a ton of Meetup events at different stores. And we're joined today by Lennon. As I've mentioned, Lennon is the manager of global coffee education and experience at Starbucks, which sounds like the coolest job. I got to say, that is like an awesome title.
Pretty fun.
Yeah, it sounds pretty awesome. In this Meetup Live, we're going to do a coffee demonstration where, Lennon, you're going to take us through kind of different aspects of how to brew coffee, the beverages that we love, and analyze things like aroma, brightness, roast, and acidity. And we're also going to learn about the different brewing methods, including French press, pour over, a little bit about the Chemex, and more. So I'm going to hand it off to you to start the demo, but also if you want to just do a little bit more of an intro on your credentials, like what qualifies you to be the global manager of coffee education at Starbucks.
Yeah, I still wonder that one some days. But thanks so much, Gwen. It is such an honor to be here, to hang out with a bunch of people around the world. It's so cool to just see the world come alive on my screen right now. I've been seeing some of those cities and some of those states and countries pop up. So welcome everyone. Welcome to Seattle right now. I'm standing in our support center for Starbucks in Seattle, Washington. So this is one of our cafes in the building where we can come make coffee. And I am just so glad to be here. I'm a 15-year partner or employee. We call ourselves partners at Starbucks. I started out as a barista. I was a part-time barista in a store in Rochester, New York. Shout out to Rochester.
Yeah.
And fell in love with coffee, fell in love with really the community that Starbucks is, and saw that, you know, it could be a career. It could be more than just a job, that I could do something that mattered, that I felt like I was giving back, and that excited me. So after a year and a half in retail, I moved from Rochester to Carson City, Nevada. I spent 4 years roasting coffee at one of our roasting plants in Nevada and learning about that manufacturing process. And then I moved to Seattle with my family. I joined the coffee quality team, where we taste all of the inbound samples. So every coffee that comes in, we're tasting a sample and approving that, saying, yes, this meets the standard for Starbucks and it can be used and roasted. And I've been on this team for 3 years. I run our Origin Experience program. We do educational trips in Costa Rica, Rwanda, and Sumatra, Indonesia each year for our retail partners. And we bring those participants to coffee growing regions and immerse them into the journey of coffee, so they get to start planting a seed and see all the way through to passing that cup across the counter, the journey that coffee takes, which is really exciting. I love my job. I love what I do. And I love coffee and the connection that it really can have around the world.
Absolutely. Well, we are very lucky to have you here today to kind of talk about and bring your knowledge and expertise to us here. And want to kind of hand it off to you to kind of take us through the demonstration and share everything you know about brewing a great cup of coffee.
All right, sounds good. So I want to start. I'm going to paint you all a picture. All right, you go into your local Starbucks. You get that cup of coffee. It is the best cup of coffee you've ever had. I'm guessing that. And you love that coffee. You say, okay, this is my coffee. This is my favorite coffee. I'm going to buy a bag of it. I'm going to bring it home. I'm going to brew it. And it doesn't taste the same. It is not great. You wonder what went wrong. And I want to demystify a little bit. I want to walk through some of this process with you, help you brew a great cup of coffee at home. And explain that it is possible. Now, there's one thing that I can't fix, and that is that for myself personally, the best cup of coffee is one that somebody makes for me. I love going into a store and having somebody craft that beverage. I have the connection with that person. I can't send a barista to your house. So I can't fix that. I'm sorry, but I'm going to do everything I can to help you with everything else along the way. So the biggest impact for brewing a cup of coffee at home is following some tips, following some guidelines that will give you the best chance of success. And we have 4 things. We call them 4 fundamentals here at Starbucks. And those 4 things are going to give you a great cup. So number 1, I'm diving right in here, is proportion. How much coffee are you using? How much water are you using? Those 2 things together is what we know of as coffee. So if you use too much coffee or too much water, that proportion is out of balance and you're not going to be bringing the right flavors out. If you ever had a situation where your cup of coffee at home tasted really, really sour, and not a fun, juicy lemonade type sour, but like just sour, kind of off, that's under extracted. So maybe you didn't have enough coffee, or maybe you had too much water in your brew, and you're not pulling all of the flavor out. That's one possibility. The other possibility is the other end. Your coffee tastes really bitter. It's just, it bites you almost in the back of the mouth, and you can taste it on the back of your tongue. It's too much. That's over extraction. You have way too much coffee right now. So you over index to the other way, and you need to be able to bring it back and find that proportion. Well, we recommend 2 tablespoons for every 6 ounces of water, or 10 grams to 180 milliliters if you're looking at the metric side of things. I kind of like to go with grams and milliliters. It's a little bit easier on my scale because I'm a geek and I do use a scale when I brew my coffee. You don't have to. If you use, so we have 2 tablespoon scoops, or even if you're using a tablespoon scoop, this is going to get you really, really close. I've done the whole weighing out and looking at the difference between it. For our medium roast coffee, if you're using 2 tablespoons for 6 ounces, it's really, really close, and you're going to have a great cup of coffee. All right. Now, so proportion is number 1. Number 2, grind. Not all grind is the same. You can't just grind your coffee and assume that it's going to work everywhere. Again, it's that contact time in water. The proportion is one part of it, but then how much contact time you have is going to impact your brew. If you have a really coarse grind, you don't have as much surface area available. Now I'm getting a little scientific geeky here, but you don't have as much surface area available. That means that you need longer contact time to be able to get the right flavors out. Flip side of that is you grind it really, really fine. And now you have a lot of contact because you have so much particles available. That means you need less contact time with your water. So you need to find the right grind size for the right brew method to be able to extract out the flavor the way that you want to, and the way it's going to give you a good cup of coffee. All right, number 3, water. Water is 98% of a cup of coffee. It's most of the cup of coffee. So you think about what goes in is what's going to come out. And that means if you have water that you wouldn't want to drink on its own in your home, it's probably not going to taste good in a cup of coffee. You want to then use a filter. Put a filter on your sink, put a filter in your fridge so that you have it available. And you're going to find that that alone is going to impact your quality cup of coffee in a huge way. So good, clean water. The other thing with water is you want the right temperature. Temperature is going to help extract out those flavors in the way that you need them to extract. So what we say is between 195 to 205 degrees Fahrenheit is that sweet spot. That's what you're looking for to be able to get the extraction out, to get those flavors to come out of the cup the way that you remember it when you went into that store. So good water at the right temperature, grind, proportion, and the last thing is freshness. So, I want you to think about it. Coffee is an agricultural product. It starts out as the seed of a cherry. And because of that, it ages like an agricultural product. When you cut open an apple, almost immediately you notice that it starts browning. That's oxidation. Well, oxygen is an enemy of coffee. So the 4 enemies: oxygen, light, heat, moisture. Those 4 things, the longer they become in contact with the coffee, the more damage it's going to do. And roasted coffee is already brown. You're not going to see it brown because it already is brown. But if you think of that concept of an apple, Realize that coffee will oxidize. You can't leave it around for months on end. You can't even leave it around for weeks on end. It needs to be fresh. What we recommend is within about a week of opening that bag, you want to use that coffee. The other thing is as close to brewing is when you want to grind it. So you don't want to grind it way in advance. You want to get as close as possible. I have a home grinder, so I'm able to grind right before I brew. I know that not everybody does, and that's okay. Just try to make sure that you're grinding as close to brewing. You can go into your store and ask them to grind it for you, for sure. Now, when I say that it's going to get old, it's going to be done, I don't mean it's going to go bad. It's not unsafe to drink old coffee by any means. It's just not going to taste great. It's going to taste papery. It'll taste stale. And it's not going to have any of those flavors that you remember from when it was fresh. So use it fresh. I know, you get that favorite cup and you want to hold on to that bag forever. Use every last drop of it and have it as long as possible. It's not going to be the same. It's seasonal. Let it be what it is in the moment and enjoy it when it comes out again next year if it's not available at all times. So those are our 4 fundamentals: proportion, grind, water, and freshness. Use those 4 things in whatever brew method you have, and you're going to end up with a really good cup of coffee. I promise. It's going to be so much better than what you remembered, and it's not difficult. All right, so I'm going to transition there, and we're going to brew some coffee. And I wish that we had aromatics that could come through the screen right now so you could smell what I'm doing as well. But I'm gonna do what I can. So we're going to start with the French press. This is an amazing, easy to use brew method. It is simple, but it looks really scary. There's all these parts that go together and you don't know what to do. So being a good Jersey boy, I'm going to start this coffee tasting by talking about pizza, because why wouldn't we talk about pizza when we're tasting coffee? Right? Of course. So with a French press, you need to start with your crust. See that nice, pretty crust? We got the slices in there. This is the base of my pizza, the base of my French press. I'm going to start with that. All right. The next thing in this weird little filter contraption is your sauce and cheese. You need to spread that evenly all over that crust. Make sure that it's good on there. Make sure that it's centered. It's going to give you an amazing pizza, I promise. Last thing, I don't want a cheese pizza. I want a little more flavor. I'm going to go with some pepperoni. Make sure that those nice little slices of pepperoni go on top of that cheese. And I end up with an amazing pizza in this analogy, which turns into my wonderful cup of coffee. That screws right onto the bottom of this post that's in the lid. And from there, I put together my French press. Now, I wanted to show putting that together, first off, so you knew how to do that, but also because this is a big thing. If we're talking about freshness, coffee oils love to hide down in between the layers of a French press filter. If you use your French press and just kind of throw it in the dishwasher as is when you're done with it, or just wipe it off in the sink, and you use that for months on end, if you were to take this apart, you'd find rancid coffee oils all in between those layers. That's going to impact your cup of coffee. So take it apart each time, clean it. It's going to be good, and it's going to be simple. Now, next step, you need the right grind. So I have my coffee ready to go. I prepped this ahead of time. And for a French press, this is an immersion brew, meaning it's going to have more contact time with the water, 4 minutes to be exact. And that means that I can use a really coarse grind. If you're looking at your grind size, you want to look for about the consistency of kosher salt. So pretty coarse in terms of its size, which is right what I have this at. Now, that 1:18 ratio, 1 gram of coffee for every 18 milliliters of water is what I'm running with. 2 tablespoons for 6 ounces if you want to use your volumetric as well. And that puts me at 54 grams of coffee that I have weighed out for my cup. So I'm going to do that. And then the nice thing with the French press, and I'm going to turn around here for a second because I have a water tap behind me, is I want to fill it up right to the bottom of this line on this French press. You are looking for right around 32 ounces of water, or about 975-ish milliliters that would get you to that level. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn around real quick. I keep talking to you while I'm doing this, and I'm going to fill up my French press. You notice that I'm swirling it a little bit, if you can see me here. I'm making sure that I get all of my grinds saturated. I don't want it to be dry. I don't want to see any little icebergs hanging out on top of it. And right about there. Good. All right. So from there, I have my timer set for 4 minutes. I'm going to take my lid. I'm just going to softly place it right on top. That's kind of just hanging out, ready. It's brewing in a little under 3 or a little over 3 minutes. I'm going to press this down, and that's a French press. It's not scary, I promise. It's super simple, and this makes an amazing cup of coffee. Now, French presses, they are going to give you more body. They're going to give you more depth in your cup of coffee. You're not going to notice it being a really bright cup of coffee. You'll taste a little bit of that for sure. But what a French press is doing, that metal screen filter that I showed you, that is allowing a lot of oils through into your finished cup of coffee. That is allowing more, we call them undissolved solids. So fine particulates that are going to get in there. And so when you get to the bottom of your cup of coffee, there's going to be a little bit of sludge in the bottom. There's going to be a little coffee left over. And those that love a French press, man, that is the most wonderful thing. Those who hate a French press, well, you might want to find a different brew method. This may not be the brew method for you. All right, so I'm letting this brew. I'm going to talk a little bit about a pour over. So a pour over is another way to brew coffee, and this is going to give you a cleaner cup. This is going to lean really into that brighter acidity, less body than what I just talked about. And that is going to give you a unique flavor. A pour over is a type of brew method with a lot of options. It's basically coffee that goes through a filter of some sort, usually paper. A Chemex is another type of pour over, and I'll show you just how to open up that filter here in a minute. So I'm going to fold my filter right off the bat. There's these nice little creases along the side. I want to fold that so it fits in well. And I'm going to place that in the top of my pour over cone. And I'm going to get myself a mug here so that I am ready. And the first thing I want to do is I want to rinse this filter. I'm going to give it a quick little rinse, make sure that I get out any residual flavor. I'm heating up my vessel. I'm heating up my cup as well so that it is ready to go. And then I'm going to use that same concept. Now, grind size. Less time, what's happening is I'm just allowing the water to flow through the coffee. So I'm going to have a lot less contact time. That means that it needs to be a finer grind size. So I'm going down to about granulated sugar for my pour over cone. And that's going to give me right about the right amount of extraction. So I'm going to put that coffee in. I weighed out 25 grams for this, which is going to be about 3 light scoops if you're doing those 2 tablespoon scoops. And I'm going to be looking for 450 milliliters of water. Now, I'm weighing this out. I have a scale underneath my cone right now because I am a coffee nerd and this is what I love to do. You can volumetrically measure that out as well. Use your measuring cup and measure the right amount of hot water out and you'll be ready to go. So we are right about there. I'm going to take a side note and I'm going to do this last step for my French press and I'm going to push it down. That is done brewing. Your French press is ready to go. I'm going to taste this in a minute and we'll talk about flavor. But right now, I'm going to brew this pour over. So you do need another thing, which is a kettle. And I have a gooseneck kettle. This is going to give you a finer stream of water and it's going to help your brew. You don't have to have it, but I promise you it is going to increase and make a better cup of coffee if you have it. So what I'm going to do, I'm looking for 450 milliliters. I'm going to start by just wetting my grind. So just a little bit of water in the top, make sure that I get all of my grounds saturated. And then I'm going to wait about 30 seconds. This is called a bloom. I'm letting the gases that are in the coffee just kind of push out. I'm letting all of the grounds saturate with water so that I don't have any dry spots in this pour over cone. That's going to help my extraction. It's going to help that proportion that is going to give me a great cup of coffee. All right. So you can see that there's just a little bit dripping out. I really tried to minimize the amount of water. From there, I put about 50 milliliters in. Now I'm going to pour the rest. And it's a nice slow pour. And this is why a gooseneck is nice. If you don't have a gooseneck, you're going to find it's really hard to do a slow pour. It's going to go pretty quickly. I'm doing small circular patterns right in the center of my pour over cone to just really saturate that ground bed. Make sure that it's extracting well. I'm shooting for about 4 minutes. It might be less, it might be more. You don't want to go too long. But ultimately, the proof is going to be in the cup. You know, remember I talked about that under extraction or over extraction. If you notice that you have a sour cup of coffee, you might be a little too coarse on your grind. It might be brewing too quickly. So you'll need to go a little bit finer on your grind size. If you notice that it's bitter, you might just need to coarsen up your grind size and give yourself a little bit more. All right, there we are, 450 milliliters. So now my coffee's brewing. It's not terrifying. It's pretty simple. This is basically a home coffee pot without the little spray arm over top. And it's going to give you a nice clean cup of coffee. We'll taste this in just a minute when it's done. The other thing that I wanted to show you from a Chemex. So Chemex has a thicker paper for the filter, meaning it is going to hold more of the oils. It's not going to allow as many oils through, and it's going to give you a cleaner cup of coffee, but that means that it's also going to slow down. You're going to have a little more contact time with the water. So you'd want to go a little bit coarser with this grind size. The other thing with the Chemex is it comes in this big piece of paper that looks really, really terrifying, and it's folded up. All you need to do is you just take one of those outer pieces and you open it up. That's going to give you your filter. You put that in your Chemex, and then the process for it, so I have my now Chemex with the paper in, the process is going to be exactly the same as before. So you're going to follow that same thing. You can do your 25 to 450 milliliters. You're going to do a little bit of the bloom and allow it to pour through to give you a great cup of coffee. All right. This is just finishing up. It's looking good. I'm loving this. I gave myself just the right size of cup. It's coming up to the lip of that cup, which is always a scary thing when you're brewing at home. And I'm going to taste some coffee. So what I did for my French press is I have our Pike Place roast. This is in every single store. You can find it anywhere. It's a medium roast coffee. It's what we brew every day for our customers and partners. It's a great cup of coffee. And I did this intentionally because I wanted to pull out some specific flavors. And I truly wish that I could share this cup with you right now. I wish that you could all be right around this table with me and that we could enjoy a cup. For the pour over, which I brewed right into the cup, I am brewing a reserve coffee that we have. It's our Hawaii Cow, and this is available in our roasteries around the world as well as our reserve stores. You can go in and find this coffee. It's a great cup of coffee from the island in Hawaii. So let's talk about the difference and let's talk about taste. I'm going to start, and the French press, Pike Place roast, this is a Latin American coffee. And we always start with smelling because aroma is directly linked to our sense of taste. You are going to notice things in the aroma, and that's going to bring a lot of memories up to the surface. Such a great smelling coffee. All right, so I'm going to take a big slurp. We slurp to aspirate across our palate. We want to spray all of our palate, get all of our taste buds engaged. It's also really hot. This is right off of a boil, so I don't want to burn my tongue. So I'm going to slurp. Oh, I needed a cup of coffee at this point. And what I'm getting is I'm not going to dive right into flavor because I think this is what terrifies a lot of people. You look at a bag and you hear notes of cocoa and rich praline, and you're going, this tastes like a cup of coffee to me. Well, you're not wrong. It is a cup of coffee, and that's okay. And it's scary when you start getting into more and more of these words that people use to talk about coffee. It's not. You do it every single day. What you're learning to do is locate. So I'm going to sip this coffee again. And I'm going to think about, how do I notice the coffee? Where does it hit my palate? I notice it a little bit at the tip of my tongue, and then it coats my mouth, but it doesn't stay around for long. It dissipates. It's pretty clean in its finish. What that tells me, that little bit on the front of my tongue, that's my sweetness receptors. So I'm getting a little bit of sweetness in the front, and then this mouth coating body is what's really coming out to me. That is the French press and the coffee together. Like I said, that French press pulls the body to the forefront, and that's what I am looking at here. So once I've located that, I need to think back. What have I tasted before that tastes like that? And this is called a sensory memory. If I say on this call right now, and Gwen, even for you, if I say the word orange, what happens in your mouth? For me,
salivate a little bit.
right? Yeah, exactly. Sides of the tongue.
Taste the orange, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're tasting an orange right now. And there's, I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't have an orange anywhere around me, right?
Right.
That's a sensory memory. It's something that you've tasted before that your body knows, and it's trying to put that into action. So when I say, okay, I notice at the tip of my tongue and it coats my mouth, that's a sensory memory. What I remember that I've tasted before, milk chocolate and cocoa. Those flavors come out and it's so beautiful and smooth. That's how we articulate. That's how we taste a coffee. I'm going to jump over to this Hawaii Kau because it's looking really good. This cup is really full. I'm going to try not to spill anything. Now this pour over, it's a lot more delicate. I don't get the body that I got out of the French press. I'm noticing that it's hits the front of my tongue, it slides around the sides. It doesn't coat my mouth the same way. It dissipates really quickly. It's bright, it's clean. There's these layers that keep coming out, and I'm trying to articulate what that is. And it's definitely bright, it's acidity. It's not like an orange though. It doesn't have that citrus punch. This is more of a peach-like acidity and a peach-like flavor. It's very delicate, but it makes me want to take another sip, which I'm going to do because I can. That's how we talk about coffee. Think of those sensory memories, put it into word, enjoy. As many times as you can, try 2 coffees alongside each other. It'll really help you understand similarities and differences. That's going to be a big thing for you. The last thing that I'll leave you with, and I think we might have some questions that are coming in. If you want to learn more, we have some tools that are available to you. Right off the bat, Starbucks Coffee Academy. You go to starbuckscoffeeacademy.com. It is open source. It's available to anyone, and you can learn more about coffee. We have modules on origin. We have modules on roasting and blending, and on brewing and craft. We also have these things called ongoing assets. And what I just walked through with how to brew French press, as I point at my pour over, how to brew a French press, how to brew a pour over, those are available as brew guides on that website. You can open that up, see it for yourself. You don't have to remember all those numbers that I threw out at you. They're easy, they're there for you. It's a great tool if you want to learn more about coffee and learn how to brew a better cup of coffee. The second thing that I would say is Starbucks Traceability. So for our bags of coffee, this wonderful new packaging that we're loving, and it launched just in time for National Coffee Day. There's a QR code on the back. That'll bring you to our traceability website, which is traceability.starbucks.com. And then there, you're able to scan. There's a code on the back of the bag that you are able to scan and find out more about this coffee. You're able to learn about where it's from, where it was grown. You can read a story, see a picture of a farmer that produced for this bag of coffee, and learn more about them. You can learn more about the roasting process and learn all the way through. So you'll see where it was grown, you'll see where it was roasted, and then that end product that is sitting in your cup, you'll be able to enjoy and understand a little bit more. So I encourage you to check those out, and keep exploring, keep having fun with coffee. It's an amazing product that brings people together, and it's really yummy too.
Wow. Yes. Thank you so much, Lennon. You really just brought to life something that like brought a full sensory experience to us, just through this, Zoom presentation, which is amazing. And I feel inspired to go get a French press. I haven't had one in years, and I really, you really brought it to life. So let's take some questions from the audience. We have a bunch of questions that have come through. Let's start off with Bob, who asks, if you can discuss the temperature of the water before brewing again.
Yeah. So 195 degrees to 205 degrees Fahrenheit is right where you want to be, just off of a boil. You don't want it to be a rolling boil. That's going to cause an opposite problem as well. But the cooler it gets, the harder it's going to be to extract the flavors out of the coffee.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. It kind of like unlocks it. The heat unlocks the flavor, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the best cleaner to use when you clean your basic coffee pot to keep the flavors fresh?
Most things, I mean, your pour over cones, your French press, they can go in the dishwasher. Sometimes it needs a little bit of a scrub. Those oils like to hang on a little bit. So just even using some dish soap in your sink is going to be fine. It's not going to be too abrasive for the brew method. So yeah, just give it a good clean.
Great. And Pascal asks, should we keep the beans in an open bag of beans in the refrigerator, in the freezer, or in the cupboard?
Great question. And I meant to touch on that. So you want to keep it in a sealed, airtight container if at all possible. Like I mentioned, it's going to start oxidizing and you want to keep it out of heat. Don't stick your coffee in sunlight. We don't recommend putting in the fridge or the freezer because moisture is another one of the enemies. So even if you have it sealed, what's going to happen is the freezer is going to start crystallizing and you're going to end up with some moisture on the bean, and that's going to degrade the coffee faster. A lot of times the best thing to do, if you get a bag of coffee, we have this little tin tie on it, fold it down really tight and put it in a nice dark space. That's going to hold it the best, but still want to use it within about a week or so.
Got it. Got it. And would you recommend grinding your beans the night before or a couple of days in advance and store it in the bag or the container?
Yeah, it's always such an interesting question because I think everybody always says, and another analogy, but the best camera you have is the one that's with you. Meaning sometimes what is best in terms of the best cup of coffee may not be available. And I realize that. So what is best is to grind as close to brewing as possible. If you can grind right before you brew, that's really, really good if you have a home grinder. Now, I'm going to tell you, I make some concessions. I'm not going to wake up at 5 in the morning and grind coffee and wake up my entire house. So I'm going to grind the night before and make that concession and know that it'll still be a good cup of coffee. If you don't have a home grinder, of course, you're going to be having to grind a couple of days in advance, and that's okay. It's what is available, what is good, and if you enjoy the cup, run with it.
Absolutely. And a couple water-based questions coming through. So Pearl asked about how you measure the temperature of the water to make sure that it's in that range.
Yeah. So I was using a kettle that has a nice little electric stand for it. So it's heating it in the moment. And that will heat it to boil and turn off. So what you would do then is if you're using that type of a kettle or if you're putting it on your stove, get it to a boil and then keep it off the flame for a little bit or off of the heating element to let it come down. And that's going to get you right into that range. It's kind of, if you're heating it up to a boil, you want to watch for right as the bubbles are starting to form in that kettle. That's when you would pull it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And
they do make fancier kettles that have thermostats on them as well that you can actually set it. I mean, I have a kettle that will set to 204 degrees and that's what it heats to.
Can you use like a thermometer, like one of those, little like thermometers? Yeah. Right.
Totally.
Just throw that in there. Yeah. And a similar question from Justin, the pour over goes colder more quickly than a French press. So what are your thoughts on the different temperatures? Would you brew it hotter for a French press and a little bit less for pour over?
It depends.
The other way around.
I think the big thing for me is I want to preheat. So you notice that I poured water through that filter right off the bat. This is a metal cone. This is our reserve pour over cone, and it holds heat really, really well. And it's not going to suck a bunch of heat. But basically, I want to preheat this and get that up to temperature. I'm also getting my mug up to temperature. So that's going to make it so that the heat is a lot more consistent and you're not going to drop down really quickly. Same with a French press. Sometimes you can just give it a quick rinse with hot water and let it warm up so you're not kind of sucking that initial heat out. And now without even trying, you're brewing at 170 degrees. That preheat's going to go a long way.
Got it. And with the pour over, we have a question from Carmita who asks, how do you know when you hit the 450 milliliter before to pour it into the cup? Like, is there a scale underneath that's holding the cup, or you just know?
Depends on how much of a geek you want to be. Yeah, so you can do a couple of things. Simplest thing, let's say you don't have a kitchen scale at home. You have a little Pyrex measuring cup and you fill that up to 450 milliliters and you can use that. You then heat that and you know exactly how much water you're using. I am using a scale underneath this. So I was looking, and as I was pouring, I was watching my scale so that I knew that I was hitting 450 milliliters. If you're looking for exact, that's going to be the way to do it for sure. But again, it's what's available to you. Make it work for you. The biggest thing is get that proportion as close as possible. You will notice a huge positive impact on your cup of coffee.
Right. It's like chemistry experiment, sure, but also within reason. Just get to
Yeah.
totally. All right. This is a good question. I'm very interested in your answer here. What
All
is
right.
your favorite types of coffee?
Oh, it's like asking what my favorite kid is. That's such a hard question. It honestly, it depends. And I say that for a specific reason. Coffee is seasonal. And that means it's grown around the world and different flavors are coming out at different times of year. So my preferences kind of shift over the course of the year. The other thing, and this is me personally, the other thing is I think about time of year. Here in the summer in Seattle, it's 80, 90 degrees Fahrenheit. I want this crisp cup of coffee that is great iced. It's like drinking orange juice, this bright, citrusy East African coffee that just jumps out of the cup and it's just lively. I don't want that in the middle of winter when it's rainy and cold. I want this Indonesian coffee that's big, it's bold, it's earthy, and I can just sip on it in front of a fire and feel like it's just warming up every part of my being. So it shifts over the course of the year, for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can relate to that as well. You want that. You
Yeah.
want that. There's the fall vibe, and then there's that summertime vibe. So Karen asked a great question about the Starbucks instant coffee via.
Yeah.
Is there a way to prepare that can kind of bring in some of the fundamentals that you were talking about today when brewing a fresh cup?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one because that's meant for a completely different situation.
Mhm.
I think it's already pre-portioned. So the biggest thing is use good water, use the right amount of water, and it tells you how much water to use on it for that cup. You don't want to go overboard on that. If you're out of whack on that water, it's going to impact that final cup of coffee. Freshness, make sure that you're using it by the expiration date that's on there, and that's going to get you into that range of a great cup of instant coffee.
Yeah, I've always been impressed with the quality of Via for like if you got to go instant coffee, it is very, very good.
For sure, out backpacking in the mountains, it's light, it's amazing. I can enjoy my cup of coffee anywhere.
Yep. And similar along the same vein, K cups. Is there
Yeah.
do you have any tips on brewing a good K cup of coffee?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be the same thing. This is a pre-portioned coffee. It's meant for a specific brew method. It's meant for the machine. Make sure you've got good water. That's going to be huge. Put that filtered water in. If you don't, you're getting the cup of water that is in your faucet.
Right.
It's dosing it out, so you don't have to worry about that as much. Make sure that you're using it by the expiration date, and that'll help you get a good cup of coffee.
Cool. Yeah. Some questions about roast. So
Yeah.
this is I love getting into the roast concept. If you
Sure.
go somewhere and you pick a bean, can you roast it to any degree? So like, could you roast any bean dark? Could you roast any bean medium, or certain beans conducive to different types of roasts?
Yes. Nice and vague. Yeah, well, I mean, you can roast any coffee to any roast level. You can roast it all the way from the light end of the spectrum to the dark end of the spectrum. Different coffees do lend themselves to different roast curves for sure. And different regions, different densities, different elevations of where the coffee is grown. It's all of the things that go into it are going to lend themselves to different things. So what our master roaster's job is to coax out the right flavor. They're looking for the best potential for that bean, where it's from. And that may shift. It depends on what we're looking for. What flavors are they looking to pull out? What do they want to showcase where the coffee comes from, the taste of origin, or do they want to showcase how the coffee's roasted, the flavor of roast? All of those pieces are going to come together, and that's just a roasting philosophy. It's what are you trying to get across? What flavors are you trying to bring out? Like any chef, they're looking to coax out just the right flavors so that when you sip it, it's exactly what we're hoping for.
Gosh, what an amazing art and skill that is. Like that's
It really is
incredible. Any tips with grind type when you're talking about iced coffee?
Oh yeah. That is also it depends. So there's kind of two types of iced coffee and I'm oversimplifying it right now, I apologize. But in terms of iced coffee, you have an ice brewed coffee and you also cold brew are kind of the two big things in the market. So a cold brew is a really long extraction time. You're actually leaving it overnight for hours in contact with cold water. Because of that, similar to a French press, you want a really coarse grind. You have a lot more contact time, so you don't need a fine grind. You're going to be pulling way too much out, and you'll end up with a bitter cold brew. For iced coffee, it's going to be brewed hot over iced. So that is typically going to follow exactly what you would do for your brewed coffee, meaning I'd do that granulated sugar for a pour over into a cup of ice. The big thing, the tip there, and we do have a brew guide for iced coffee on Starbucks Coffee Academy. The big thing you're going to be doing is you're going to be using less water because you'll have ice in the vessel that's going to melt. So it's kind of figuring out, there's a little more math involved. It gets a little more tricky, but it's going to give you that final proportion in the end.
And when you kind of think about like adding like milk and stuff like that, do you like, we haven't gotten into milk too much, but there like, is there any tips around how to kind of factor that into this whole process when you're thinking like latte, espresso, misto? What are any tips there, recommendations?
I think my biggest tip is find what you like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're adding any type of inclusion, flavors or milk or anything that you're adding to coffee, do what you enjoy. Coffee is such a personal experience. There's a cup of coffee for everyone. And that's what I love about it. It's not all the same. It's not, okay, you have to drink this one thing that I love, because that may not be what you love. That may not be how you like to drink it. You may like it on a French press. I might like it on a pour over. Somebody else might like it as a latte with milk in it. Somebody else might want a hazelnut brewed coffee of it. That's the beauty of coffee, is finding what you like and just adjusting until you find that sweet spot.
Yeah, and I think like you said, it could be really seasonal, or my wife and I were really into the Chemex for a while until we kind of got bored of it, and we were like, all right, let's get an espresso machine. So it's so many options that can just keep you engaged with the flavors.
Absolutely.
When we talk about cup acidity and clarity, how do you compare one cup to the other in those terms? I mean, you were kind of doing it when you were taking us through the. Can you talk a little bit more about how you break it down?
Yeah, so I think about it in levels, and this is building a sensory vocabulary. The reality is learning to talk about coffee, learning to talk about flavor and taste it is more about learning a language than it is about learning a skill. You are expressing yourself in a different way. And as we did with the orange analogy, you do it every day, but it's hard to articulate that. So comparing and contrasting is the way that you get better at it. You taste one thing and then you taste another, and you look at levels. And let's think about those levels. I mentioned that the cacao is peach-like, and then we talked about an orange. If you were to think about those two real world flavors, peach, they're both acidic, they're both citric in acidity, but a peach is going to be a softer acidity. It has a lower level of acidity, whereas an orange is going to be higher. Lemon or a grapefruit is even way up here. It's off the camera. And that is going to give you those levels and those indicators. So as you taste things together, as you taste things side by side, you're able to say, okay, this cup of coffee I'm noticing it less in acidity. This other cup is more. And now you're able to find the layers. Now you're able to say, I get it. This one has a less acidity. This one has more acidity. And because of that, I'm remembering this orange that I tasted. I'm remembering this peach I tasted, and I can start correlating those and expanding my vocabulary, being better at talking the language of coffee.
Wow. Well, on that note, you have really given us some great tools, techniques, terminology, and I just want to thank you again for joining us today. This has been a real treat for me and for our entire community. We're gonna wrap up. If we could just share the screen to the slides. Want to just again thank you so much, and thanks Starbucks for having you come on and show us how to do this. And I want to just share that Meetup is now on TikTok. Check us out, give us a follow at Meetup. We post really fun and engaging, awesome content that you definitely want to check out. So follow us. And then we also, if you go to the next slide, we have a podcast that our CEO, David Siegel, hosts called Keep Connected. It's amazing. Take a moment, take out your phone, scan this QR code, and give it a listen. You're going to love it. And just as a reminder, you can view a recap of this event. We're going to have it up on our blog, Community Matters, which we'll post in the chat. We're going to have it up in a few days so you can watch, you can relive this entire experience with Lennon again. So again, thank you so much. This has been great. And I hope everybody has an awesome day. Take care. Thank you, Lennon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.